Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving into a genuinely wild 30-year slice of history. We're going to unpack the story of the Hampton Beach Street Railway. It's the story of how one incredibly ambitious transit system swooped in and literally transformed Hampton Beach from a sleepy little regional spot into a booming national vacation destination. Grab a seat because we're jumping right in.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the birth of the trolley, then move into building the beach empire and an economic powerhouse. After that, we'll hit some cultural friction in the Sunday-Sabbath clash before wrapping up with the rise of the automobile and finally, the end of the line.
To keep us oriented, we're tracking a dizzying 30-year life cycle here. We kick things off in 1897, blow through some massive casino construction in 1899, hit those legal clashes around 1905, see the roads shift for cars in 1916, hit peak efficiency in 1924, and then a total shutdown by 1927. It's a fast ride.
All right, Section 1, the birth of the trolley, 1897.
So the year is 1897. A promoter and builder named Wallace D. Lovell steps onto the scene and organizes the Exeter, Hampton, and Amesbury Street Railway Company. A local guy, Judge Charles Lamprey, drives the very first spike, and tracks start rolling out from Hampton Village down toward Highland Avenue. Now, you might be wondering how the locals reacted. They were all in. In fact, during those early winter months, Oscar Jenkins Cafe, right at the junction of Ocean Boulevard and Ashworth Avenue, actually served as the southern terminal for the whole line. The moment this started, local hotel owners went into an absolute frenzy, repainting and expanding, just bracing for the massive crowds they knew were coming.
But listen, this railway wasn't just a joyride for beachgoers. It proved its real-world value almost immediately during a terrible tragedy. On the 4th of July in 1898, this freak tornado-like storm slammed into the beach and completely flattened a local theater where 400 people were packed inside watching a show. With dozens injured and local telephone lines totally wiped out, the street railway became an absolute lifeline. They used the cars to transport the injured straight to Exeter Hospital. So, right out of the gate, it was a profound proof of concept for what this infrastructure could do.
Which brings us to our second chapter, Section 2, Building the Beach Empire.
Okay, so you've got a railway, but you need people to ride it. Wallace D. Lovell realized pretty quickly that to sell trolley tickets, he had to give people a massive reason to visit the destination. So what did the railway company do? They literally built the beach's tourism infrastructure themselves. Since Lovell couldn't find a good spot near Boar's Head, he just leased some sand dunes and built the gigantic Hampton Beach Casino in 1899. And they didn't stop there. The very next year, they built the 57-room Ocean House right next door, with electric lights and hot running water, which was a big deal back then. They dropped a cool $1,000 on a landmark bandstand and threw up the Hampton Inn for good measure. Now, building all of this practically overnight was a logistical nightmare. But they had a brilliant solution. A local lumber dealer named Edwin Janvrin set up a portable sawmill right next to the street railway's powerhouse on Exeter Road. Think about how clever this is. They could load the freshly milled, incredibly heavy timber directly onto the streetcars and just drive the raw materials straight onto the beach construction sites. The trolley system was quite literally building the very empire it was designed to serve. To really grasp the scale of this operation, picture this. On special Portsmouth and Dover days back in 1899, the Boston and Maine Railroad would drop off massive crowds of day trippers at the Hampton Depot. Waiting for them, right on the spot, would be a fleet of 10 streetcars, lined up and ready to whisk them directly to the casino. It was a perfectly oiled tourism machine.
That seamless coordination leads right into Section 3, an economic powerhouse.
So how do you keep these crowds entertained so they keep paying fares? Well, you get pretty creative. In 1901, the street railway management actually built a miniature log cabin behind the casino and filled it with 7 live monkeys. I'm not kidding. And, as you can probably guess, it didn't end well. 2 of the monkeys broke out, and one of them bolted into the casino kitchen and actually bit the cook so badly he had to be hospitalized. It's a wild, slightly ridiculous story, but it perfectly highlights the absolute lengths this corporation would go to amuse tourists and keep those fare dollars rolling in. And hey, crazy stunts or not, it worked. The demand became absolutely staggering. By the 4th of July in 1905, the railway had to dispatch loaded streetcars from Exeter and Portsmouth every 30 minutes, from the crack of dawn until late in the afternoon, just to manage the sheer crush of tourists. Hampton Beach was now a massive economic engine, and the trolley was the fuel. But of course,
Aggressive corporate expansion eventually runs into a wall. Section 4. The Sunday Sabbath Clash.
I want you to consider this. What happens when an aggressive, profit-driven transit company, desperate for weekend ridership, operates in a deeply traditional, conservative New England town? A major cultural collision is practically guaranteed.
This is what we call the Puritan Sabbath clash. See, the street railway needed those Sunday passenger fares to survive, so they pushed hard to keep the casinos, bowling alleys, pool halls, and skating rinks open 7 days a week. But local clergy and town officials were having none of it. They firmly believed that Sunday amusements secularized the Lord's day and pointed to state laws that had literally been on the books since 1843.
This wasn't just grumbling in the town square either. It turned into a real legal battle. In the summer of 1905, deputy sheriffs actually marched down to the casino and arrested two men, William Barrett and Raymond Heckman. Their crime? Operating bowling alleys on a Sunday. The men argued that times were changing and working people needed recreation, but the court didn't care. They were found guilty and fined. It's a fascinating look at how corporate commercial interests slammed right into traditional community values.
Ultimately, though, it wasn't the local sheriffs that brought the trolley down. It was a new invention. Section 5, Rise of the Automobile. By 1915, ownership of the railway had changed hands a few times, and they were in deep, deep financial trouble. The fatal flaw of the trolley was its rigidity. You were literally tied to their tracks and their schedules. But the automobile? That was all about personal freedom and flexibility. Tourists were rapidly deciding they'd rather just drive themselves to the beach on their own time. By 1916, this paradigm shift became incredibly visible. Car traffic was so heavy that the town had to widen Ocean Avenue. To make room, they literally ripped up the trolley lines and shoved them over to the west side of the road. The streetcar was physically being pushed aside to make way for the future.
Which brings us to our final chapter, Section 6, End of the Line.
The railway was failing, but the town of Hampton knew that if the transit connection died, their tourism pipeline would dry up with it. So, in a desperate move, the town itself actually bought the struggling railway. Throughout the early 1920s, they tried everything to save it, introducing dirt-cheap excursion packages just to get bodies in the seats.
And honestly, the town ran it incredibly well. By 1924, this municipal system was a logistical marvel. Get this, they could load 1,000 passengers for a single-trip excursion in just 4 minutes. 4 minutes! That is remarkable efficiency. But it just didn't matter. Despite that incredible capacity, they were bleeding money, fighting an impossible battle against the personal car.
The writing was on the wall. In late September of 1927, the town-owned street railway finally ceased all operations. A tiny little connection to Salisbury Beach held on for a few more years, but the grand trolley era, the very system that had built the casino, laid down the hotels, and birthed Hampton Beach as we know it, was officially dead.
It is honestly wild to look back and realize that this massive, transformative infrastructure rose, dominated the landscape, and completely vanished in just 30 years. So, I want to leave you with this. If the automobile could completely erase the mighty street railway in just 3 decades, what rising technology today is going to quietly replace the infrastructure that we completely take for granted? Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep questioning everything, and I'll catch you next time.